So the first set of transporters are the Wei vessels, the Yang Wei and the Yin Wei. Those vessels have in their pathway a direct connection to the Du and the Ren. And so their job is to take the resources of the Du and the Ren, of primal Yang and primal Yin, and distribute them over time from birth to death. That's the function.
I'm Michael Max, and this is Geological, the podcast that curates East Asian medicine and methods through the power of conversation. I know I recently said this on the podcast, but it's worth repeating. And it's important to remember and not lose sight of the fact that acupuncture, it's weird. It really is. Extremely strange. Think about it for a moment. A few thin needles, no medication of any sort on them, thin, sterile bits of quality steel, and thank goodness that we live in an age where this kind of thing is easily produced and accessed as well. Needles that placed properly encourage the body to change in profound ways. Stop bleeding, improve digestion, induce a night of restful sleep, calm the mind and spirit without resorting to the ingestion of external chemicals or substances. That's weird, right? I mean, as acupuncturists, we like to talk about how it uses the body's innate capacities. We use metaphors from nature to describe what is happening in our patients' bodies and experience. We lean on something like poetry to explain the invisible world of meridians and the expanded function of the organs. Or we dress it up and scientize it, sterilize it with the language of modern medicine, gussy it up to fit postmodern sensibilities, and do what we can to make it palpable to mainstream culture. Maybe other folks, they go the other way around and promote the work as shamanistic, a pre-modern treasure with a long history that stands as a kind of social proof that it's not flim-flam, and furthermore, suggest that we have the essence of brilliant dead doctors at our disposal. Stranger yet, there are different methods, and they can all get noticeable results in the right hands. It's the opposite of modern healthcare's flow-charted standard of care. And if that is not enough, we use a language to describe the work that is infused with the images and dynamics of courts and kings. The very kinds of systems of privilege and oppression that many of us actively struggle against, that's how we explain the workings of acupuncture. I'm not saying that weird is bad. And as to contradictions, I figure that any life that is interesting, imaginative, and creative, you're going to run yourself into contradictions. That's not a problem. It's an opportunity. But what I do want to say and own is that acupuncture is strange stuff. And after spending a few decades of trying to unweird it in the service of hoping to make it more attractive and acceptable to my new patients, I finally admitted defeat. I can't unweird it anymore. It's strange stuff. So be it. Not only is acupuncture strange, with its 12 invisible watersheds of flow and influence, but we have the Qi Jing Ba Mai, the strange flows, usually translated as the 8 extraordinary vessels. Some say these are the blueprint that gives structure to the embryo as it develops. These flows help to orient and guide development. Others say that these vessels are deeply tied into our psycho-emotive functioning. Traditionally, they are talked about as reservoirs. They help to regulate the excess or lack in the 12 main channels. As for me, I can't say that I understand them all that well. And that is why I like to talk to folks who have spent time investigating the extraordinary nature of these vessels, which is why I'm delighted to share this conversation with Yvonne Farrel and Luke Adler. Together, they've spent some time looking into and clinically working with the 8 extras, as we commonly like to call them. Are they strange or are they fundamental? Listen in and find out for yourself right after these words from the folks that you should sit down and write a thank you note to for making it possible for Qiological to land in your podcast feed every Tuesday. These conversations come to you through the generous support of our sponsors and members. Blue Poppy, your new one-stop shop, has speedy shipping options on everything that you need for your clinic. It's Women's Health Month at Mayway Herbs. Check out their new website for learning resources on helping women with herbal medicine. Are you a creature of habit? How about making a change that helps your patients and the planet with AcuFast needles? And later in the show, raising your fees doesn't have to be a difficult process. Jane has helpful suggestions on making it easy and effective. And finally, have you considered that having a thriving, profitable practice is one of the most healing things that you can do? Julie Bear Don't Walk has, and she can help you do something about it too. Do be sure to visit the sponsors page on the Qiological website to take advantage of all the special offers our terrific sponsors have for listeners of the podcast. Picture this. Your clinic is buzzing with patients, and then you realize that you're down to your last box of needles. No need for panic, because Blue Poppy, your one-stop shop for all your acupuncture needs, they ship orders received before 3 p.m. on the same day. With a quick visit to Blue Poppy's website, you can order premium needles, herbal formulas, and that special Dr. Bob's oil that your patients love. Blue Poppy understands practitioners can't keep patients waiting. That's why they strive to get you what you need when you need it. From high-quality Chinese herbs and formulations to acupuncture supplies and clinical essentials, Blue Poppy has served practitioners for nearly 40 years with products that meet the highest of standards. Discover everything Blue Poppy has to offer by visiting www.bluepoppy.com, and don't forget to subscribe to their mailing list for exclusive offers and more.
Hi folks, I'm Yvonne Lyle, president of Mayway Herbs. May is Women's Health Month, and as a women-owned and women-run business, we especially love how Chinese medicine can support wellness through every stage of a woman's life. So in this month's newsletter and podcast, we're covering topics like PMS, pregnancy, menopause, and osteoporosis. We'll share expert insights and effective treatment strategies you can put to good use in your clinic. Our Plumflower brand line includes herbal tea pills, tablets, extract granules, and organic herbs, all of which you can find on Mayway.com, and where you can also find articles, videos, and other resources to support your practice. Since 1969, Mayway has been a trusted source for high-quality herbal products. In these challenging times, please know that we remain committed to keeping our products accessible and affordable so you can take care of yourself and your patients. As always, thank you for supporting Real Chinese Medicine.
Daily habits and routines feel comforting, familiar, easy, automatic. That's the power of repetition. You've worked out the kinks and can do it with your eyes closed. But what if you shook things up? What if you ditched the old routine and tried something new? Hi, I'm John Sten. I've practiced acupuncture for over 30 years, and together with my wife Kelly, we created the world's first eco-friendly acupuncture needle. The AcuFast earth-friendly needle system cuts your packaging waste by 60 to 90%, depending upon your needle type, speeds up your needling, gives you more control, and best of all, while you're healing patients, we plant a tree for every 2 boxes your clinic uses. Thousands of acupuncturists have already made the switch. In just the last year, they've helped plant over 16,000 trees. Since we started, that number has grown to over 50,000. So break the routine. Be the change. Visit acufastneedles.com. Your patients and the planet will thank you.
Yvonne Farrel, Luke Adler, welcome to Qiological.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
We are going to get into the extraordinary vessels today. You guys seem to have some things to say about that. The extraordinary vessel, isn't that a great name? Extraordinary vessels.
It is.
I've been at this game for a while now. I got to tell you, I don't really get the extraordinary vessels. I feel like I have a relationship with the regular channels. Like I'm on a first name basis with them.
Yes.
The extraordinary vessels, they're a bit mysterious. I can't say I've been able to wrap my mind around them. When I use them in clinic, it's because I've got this idea about them. I've got a theory that I'm playing with, but I don't really have a sense of them. So I would like to begin. And Luke, let's start with you. Like, what drew you to the extraordinary vessels? And what's your sense of them?
To answer that question, I have to preface it by what drew me to Chinese medicine. And honestly, it was purely spiritual reasons that drew me to Chinese medicine.
Really?
It was, yeah. I had had a very strong spiritual life as a child, and I wanted to have a career where that was integrated into it. And of course, my first choice was to become a monk. Wanted to be a monk, and that wasn't available in the meditation tradition that I was a part of. So my teacher was like, you need to be in the world. And when I discovered Chinese medicine, I was blown away that there was a clear theoretical basis for spirituality linked into physiology, and that philosophy and that theory was explicit. It wasn't a belief system. It was linked into symptomology, linked into the vitality of the system, which to me was thrilling because that really had been my experience up at that point. And when I took my first class with Yvonne and her dear friend David Chan in acupuncture energetics and the secondary vessels, I knew this is why I came to Chinese medicine school. Here it was, the theory of how the soul unfolds its curriculum through the physical form. And I had never experienced anything so clear, right? I'd been part of a kind of Hindu mystical tradition that had its own kind of principles about meditation and chanting. But this was the link into the experience of being a human being. And to me, the 8 extras were the kind of ultimate expression of how that unfolds.
Wow. The 8 extras, the ultimate expression of how this unfolds. Okay. We're going to stick a pin in that for a moment because I know we're going to come back to it. That's a great opening salvo. Well done.
Thank you.
Yvonne, what about you?
Yeah, now you want me to follow that. Great.
Yeah, well,
I'll just follow that.
just follow that.
I had a slightly different experience. I was attracted to Chinese medicine because I was looking for a career where I could have my own business and I could do something that helped people to feel better. And to be honest, my first search was chiropractic school, and I had a toddler and you had to go full time. So that didn't work out for me. And I sort of by default ended up in acupuncture school.
That's funny. You know, you could have opened an ice cream store. That would make people happy, and you have a business.
I mean, I did cut hair for years and I did body work, but I was really looking for something that wouldn't require a lot of physical exertion because it was raising a toddler, and I wanted something that I could do that I wouldn't get bored around. So I studied Chinese medicine, right? And I'm in my 3rd year, and I'm saying to myself, this better not be all there is. I was finding gaps. I was feeling as if the system that I was learning wasn't complete. I was feeling like it wasn't going to do what I wanted it to do. And this same teacher that Luke has been talking about, David Chan, said to me, okay, wait, because I wanted to quit school. I'm halfway through my 3rd year and I wanted to drop out. This isn't for me. I'm not going to do this. And he said, no. I'm going to take you with me to a Jeffrey Yuen class. And so I went to a class halfway through my 3rd year of school to one of Jeffrey's classes. It happened to be on the 8 extras. I didn't understand 90% of what he was saying. I mean, it was like way over my head. It was too much. And in fact, at the first break, I had been sitting in the front row. And in the first break, I had to move back 8 rows because the information was coming too hard, too fast, and it had too much transmission with it, right? But as I got back and I created a little distance, I began to realize, oh, this is what's missing. This is the piece that makes all the other stuff I've already learned make sense. And so, I mean, even before I graduated, it was like, okay, this is I need to learn this. I need to understand this. I need to embody this, because my experience of spirituality up until that point was that a lot of people were living their spirituality from the diaphragm up, and they weren't embodied in the living experience of what it is to be human, which I think is the most spiritual thing you can do if you're already incarnated. And it was the understanding of the 8 extraordinary vessels that helped me to see that was possible, that it could be done.
So this experience at that first class with Jeffrey Yuan took all these loose ends that you had, began to knit them together. And what knit them together was extraordinary vessels.
Yes, because I began to see that it wasn't just about the postnatal experience we have of living our lives. Like all the channels that we learn in school, the primary channels, the sinews, the lows, the divergent meridians, these are all wonderful channels, but they're all postnatal in nature. Without the 8 extras, they don't have an anchor. They don't have a root. They don't have potential. They only have what's happening right here, right now. And I wanted something that gave root to postnatal experience. And so I found that in the 8 extras.
That's an evocative statement. Give root to postnatal experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Why are we here? Or
why not?
Why the hell are we here? And like, how can we make the most out of that? Right?
That's usually the question, isn't it?
How can we make the most out of that experience? How can we tap into the gifts that we've been given from our parents and from the heavenly mandate in such a way that we use that potential in a mighty human kind of way?
I'm struck by the language that you use here.
Yes.
I don't hear people talking like this every day. Mighty, powerful way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you get to an age, where you start to realize that if you don't really embrace the fullness of life, if you don't live it in the most human way possible, that you're missing out on a big ride.
I know it slips by pretty quick. I can tell you that. Tell me more about the ride that most people are missing out on and how the 8 extras are involved.
You want to do that, Luke, or do you want me to?
I mean, I of course love hearing you speak, but I'll give it a few minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can tell by the language that Yvonne and I are both using. We're using more conceptual language, symbolic language that doesn't exist in the kind of dimensionalities of matter and mass. We're talking about concepts that you have to kind of use your interoception. You have to feel into, you could say with your heart, with your shen, you have to kind of sense them. And it's a capacity we all have, right? But the distinction is with more about matter and mass, right? When we talk about health and well-being, we think, oh, let's talk about qi, blood, jinya, jing. Let's talk about cells. Let's talk about metabolic processes, whatever system we want to work within, system of science. But we're talking about a dimension that you can measure, you can quantify with tests, with labs, with tape measures, et cetera. The dimensionality that we're pointing to is one that you can't measure with those tools. It can be measured, but not with those tools. And so we have to make a distinction around what it is we're willing to consider. Of course, it's easier to consider something you can see and interpret with your 5 senses. Something you can touch, taste, smell, hear, et cetera. But it takes on another sense to sense what you can't interpret with those 5, right? And that's more of, I hesitate to use the word intuition because there's too much stigma around it, but it's more feeling. You feel something. It's like the way a space feels, the way you feel with your partner, the way you feel with your child. You can sense things. If you're with a partner for a long time, really long time, when they're pissed, when they're sad. They don't have to say it. You pick up on it. You can sense it. That's kind of directionality we're pointing to, and why the 8 extras are difficult to grok is because they're often taught in a didactic, measurable, descriptive way. And of course, that you can see the paradox with that. That's problematic. when you study the 8 extras, because you have to at some point take a leap into that other kind of sensory perception.
Yes. So if I'm getting this correctly, let me see if I'm on track here. In essence, it's the difference between what is quantifiable and qualifiable. The difference between quantity, we can measure that. Pull out the yardstick, you can measure it. Pull out your photometer or whatever, you can measure it. But how do you measure qualitative? You really can't. It's something that's experienced in a sort of gestalt. And indeed, it's on that, I think you said interoception, right? It's experienced with the inner world. You can't really measure it. You can talk about it, kind of. You can paint it probably easier than you can talk about it. You can dance it easier than you can talk about it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you're talking about the qualitative.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And you can report on it. Like you say, you can talk about it. You can kind of give a retrospective or even a prospective on the quality of it. You could maybe gather a study of how that experience was for you, get some descriptive words around it and kind of paint it. I think that the challenge here for us as clinicians and scholars is can we refine our language enough to get as close as possible to painting that picture? And that's the challenge for any teacher, is to refine. Can we nail it through the words? Maybe if we really sit with it. And that to me is the great challenge of Chinese medicine and the great distinction between Chinese medicine research and allopathic research. Chinese medicine research is about strategic contemplation. It's about taking a subject and sitting with it, bringing it deep into your awareness. Western medicine, allopathic measuring is the double-blind gold standard. They don't do that. They don't take information inside. They put it outside and they bat it around. But this is our great inheritance, right? Is cultivating the Shen, to concentrate it enough so that information reveals itself to us through our dedication.
Yeah, that's a little more tricky to teach, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes.
It's more challenging. Yeah, definitely.
Yes.
For sure. Because you cannot say, read these chapters in this book. I mean, you can to some degree. I mean, that's a starting point. I might be mixing metaphors. It's a data point.
Yes.
And something that is beyond data.
Yes. Yeah. So like if I'm teaching the 8 extra to someone or to a group of people, which I've been doing for a very, very long time, I can talk to them about how to do a Renmai treatment. I can talk to them about what a Renmai treatment, what the function of the vessel is. I can talk about the indications for its use. I can talk about the importance of creating a prescription that will open and regulate that vessel. But the truth is if you want to do a really good Renmai treatment, you have to become the Renmai. You have to embody the vessel in such a way that you emanate the energetics of that system, and that fills the space. And so the patient then feels what it is to be in the sea of yin.
Okay, this is evocative. I'm thinking about how at times in clinic, I'm sitting with somebody and they're anxious or they're disturbed or they're just, maybe they're distracted, but they're keyed up. And that used to annoy me because I didn't know what to do with it. Over the years, I have found if I stay a little bit calmer, I feel my butt on the chair, I notice where my breath is, I stick with my quietude. I don't let my voice go up and get like this, but I keep it modulated, a little quieter, a little FM DJ. They settle down.
Yes, because you've embodied the sea of yin.
Right. I think of it as I have created a kind of coherence for myself. And how do I say this? It's like two stars orbiting each other, like a planetary system. The effects of the gravity on one will affect the gravity on the other. And me as the practitioner, I'm doing this with little awareness with the intention of helping them settle down. So I have to settle me down and then they can settle down. So I think what I'm hearing you say is if you can have this personal relationship with these vessels, that will strike a resonance with the other person beyond where you put a needle.
Beyond. And as much as I love my needles and am not prepared to give them up, you don't need them to do that job.
Yeah. Okay. Help me understand how to develop a relationship with the vessels.
Well, I think that, the best way to do that is your example was perfect in that life teaches us this, right? Because the 8 extraordinary vessels are archetypal, they are the kind of cosmic roadmap to embodiment. So we're working on them all the time, whether we want to call it that or not. And I think your example was a perfect example of the Renmai, right? That sea of tranquility, of calmness, the ocean of the compassion of Kuan Yin, whatever metaphor you want to use to describe that qualitative state. Let's talk about the Dumai, right? You don't have to answer this, Michael, but what in our lives has been really difficult? What has brought to us the door of great challenge, where we've had to step up, where we've had to make a choice? We had to cut one thing off to choose another, right? That's Dumai, that's action, that's determination, that's focus. You could call it father, you could call it yang, you could call it Dumai, right? But in terms of the mapping of the 8 extras, we see, wow, there's a map that describes all of this and how this unfolds through physiology. I think that's the best way to talk about it. We could do that with Chong, we can do that with Dai, et cetera. But it's a curriculum we're all already on.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. As you were speaking there, Luke, in bringing up Dumai, I'm thinking to myself, okay, you just labeled an experience that I've had for myself as the Renmai. I get that. You said do, and I'm thinking, in a sense like Manjushri with the sword that cuts through delusion, all right? It's like it's this or it's that. It's boundaries. It's I'm going to call it the good father. Holds boundaries, sets challenges, because you know what? Challenges make us resilient.
Yes.
So that's the Dumai, huh? Oh, I love it.
And so that's why we're talking about these in terms of their archetypal nature, because it's not just Chinese medicine, it's the universe. These truths, these characteristics of nature or the cosmos can be found everywhere, right? And they can be expressed everywhere. So like I'm saying to you, you worked on the Sea of Yin. Well, you're not thinking of it that way while it's happening. You're thinking, I'm going to calm myself down so I don't add to this chaos, right? But that is archetypally the nature of the Ren, right? And so we can look at the nature of these vessels from their functions and from their pathways, right? So we know the Renmai is the Sea of Yin, which means it governs everything yin. Yin channels, yin functions, yin substances, even yin pathogens. And so that gives you some idea of the nature of that vessel. But you don't really understand it until you do what you did. You feel it in your body. I'm going to change my vibration. So my vibration is more Ren than Du or Daimai or Yang Chao. I'm going to just try to realign everything in my system by putting my intention towards what I know in me is the nature of that vessel. So when I'm saying you have to become it, you have to put your intention towards the archetypal nature of that system and become it. And as you become it, everything around you changes.
And you'll see it in all kinds of places, I would suspect.
Absolutely.
You'll recognize that resonance in different places.
Yes, and you'll recognize the imbalance in that resonance the minute your patient sits down in front of you.
Oh, now that would be really handy, wouldn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is. I love the sense of archetypes. Maybe because as a younger person, I was very drawn to the work of C.G. Jung. And yeah, he's always been a guy who's been like on my bookshelf since I was 19 or something, maybe 20. And that sense of archetype is something that I certainly resonate with. I see it in all kinds of places. I've been doing a fair amount of Sa'am acupuncture these days, which is a really interesting system. And there's a sense of archetypical resonances that go with channels there as well. It's a way. It's not the way, but it's a way of getting a feeling for things. Luke, what you were talking about, that qualitative experience, that kind of beingness. So can we walk through the archetypes and get a sense of the pantheon here?
Sure. We can do, like headlights or headlines and bullet points, right? Because the panoply of them is great and vast, but there are some sort of things that shine, that come first quickly, right?
Yeah. Just see if we can kind of get a sense. Take us through the landscape. Give us a little tour of the landscape.
So historically, when we learn the 8 extras, we learn them in pairs, right? With a Renmai goes with the Yin Chao. Lung 7 goes with kidney 6. We think of them in terms of master points and couple points. But really, that's not how the evolution of humanity is expressed. That's a postnatal management system for clinical purposes, right? So when we think about how they are archetypally born, right, you have to start with the Chong. And the reason that we start with the Chong is because everything comes out of the void, and the void coalesces in a way that creates a level of oneness, a level of unity. And in that unity, there is no polarity, right? And that's why we have the Chongmai here, because the Chongmai is undifferentiated yin and yang. It has everything in it. It has yin in it, it has yang in it, and it is not related to polarity, right? It's not related to day and night. It's not related to hot and cold. It's not related to wet and dry. It's got everything in it. So it is basically the birthplace of the 8 extras. And it comes down to this sort of understanding that when you have something that has this wholeness to it, you can't really live a life from birth to death from that place. Because being incarnated as a human being means you have to embrace polarity, right? You have to embrace day and night, cold and hot, wet and dry.
Absolutely.
And so...
otherwise, we have nothing to differentiate this from that.
Exactly. And you also don't have the passage of time, right? To get to birth, from birth to death, requires an interaction with polarity. And so from the Chongmai, you only have the oneness. So what the Chongmai literally does, the energetics, that archetypal energy, shrinks in on itself and makes space to give birth to the first polarity of yin and yang, right? So archetypally, we think of it as the fountainhead. We think of it as the birthplace. We think of it as the blueprint. We also think of it as the link to everything that came before, right? So now we have this shrinking in on itself, giving birth to primary yin, primary yang. So we have the Ren and the Do, right? You want to do this, Luke? You want to do the Ren and the Do?
Oh, Ren and the Do? Sure, I can approximate those two. I mean, Yvonne has laid out the kind of physiological manifestations of them. If we look at them archetypally, that's the birth of polarity. It's the birth of tension, right? It's the birth of interaction, of locomotion. So we see, with the Chong, we have just this vibratory resonance of wholeness. This kind of, what is it, saying that we have in Chinese medicine, the 1 becomes the 2, the 2, the 4, the 4, the 8, etc. But the 1 is complete before it divides. And as it divides, we have this opposition. And there's a lot of work right now trending in the United States and in Los Angeles, particularly around polarity. If I'm in my masculine energy, then it kind of evokes you to be in your feminine energy, and et cetera, and so on. And it plays out around dating, so to speak. But it is a manifestation of these polarities, that when there's an energy in the space that's very directive, it's very kind of lead oriented, it provides a certain structure. I kind of think of it sometimes like the volcano, the mountain that's so strong. That directiveness allows the lava to come up through, and a directive kind of force for all of that energy. The same metaphor could be used for a river, right? The banks of this river have this guidance system. Now, if there was no water flowing through this river, then it wouldn't be a river. It would just be the bottom of a valley, just be a canyon. But the two together have this symbiotic generative power, right? It's agentic in nature. That yin and yang provide force. They provide direction. They provide in a certain sense a story, a narrative of our lives, where it starts, where it is, where it's going, et cetera, and so on. But we have to remember, all of this is coming from somewhere. It's not independent on its own. And sometimes we can get lost in the polarity. Well, the water and the river, well, there's something beyond that. And that's the Chiang Mai. There's something even prior to. And I think you've heard this, some people talk about this, Michael, that the vessels predate humanity. And I would say my thinking of it is the vessels are prior to humanity because it's beyond time. So we have to take time out of the equation when we talk about the entirety of the 8 extras. They exist, their origination in the Chiang Mai is beyond the confines of sequentiality. It's just resonance of the universe itself. And then division, Ren and Du. And we can flesh that out in terms of all the way down to different substances, right? This is the genius of Chinese medicine. The one theory in Chinese medicine that can never be disputed is the theory of yin and yang. Everything can be brought back to that, and it does make sense. Whereas if you bring in the 5 phases, it's very beautiful. But some of those, like overacting on this sequence, like, I don't quite get how that one works, right? You kind of make an argument, etc.
This episode is brought to you by Jing, the clinic management software that honestly just makes running a practice easier. Let's dive into something that's never easy, but sometimes necessary. Raising your fees. It can feel awkward, right? But here's a tip that can really help. Consider offering flexibility to your patients as you introduce the change. When patients face new fees, it's natural for them to feel uncertain or concerned. That's where flexibility can really make a difference. Offering options like a phased increase, suggesting a payment plan, or even taking a moment to talk things through can help to ease the transition. These thoughtful gestures show your patients that you're listening and care about them, which strengthens the trust you've worked so hard to build. If you're looking for more ideas on how to navigate these kinds of changes, head to frontdesk.jane.app and check out the article, How to Tell Clients You're Raising Your Fees. One last thing, if you're ready to give Jane a try, you can use the code CHIOLOGICAL for a 1-month grace period on your new Jane account. Well, we're looking at, by the time we get to the 5 phases, we're mucking around in the 10,000 things.
There you go. That's well said.
That's always going to be muddy. The thing I love about the 5-phase way of looking, it's probably the earliest model we have for looking at homeostasis. There are things that promote, there are things that control, and that's how homeostasis works. Great when you're mucking around in the 10,000 things. I really love it here that we've started with undifferentiated wholeness, pure potential, everything and nothing. Like what's the Chong? It's everything, but it's also nothing because there is no thing because we don't have a yin and yang. You can't have a thing until you got something and something to observe the something.
Yeah, that's right.
There you go. Well said.
I'm just playing around with it, right? And that's the really cool thing about the Chong in a way, right? It's everything and it's nothing.
Yes.
Okay, like chew on that for a bit. And we hear every single great religion, every single great spiritual path that's truly a spiritual path. It always talks about, it's all one. Everything is all connected and it's all the same thing, but different. It's all the same, but different. So there's your Chong, there's your Ren, and your Du. Luke, I love what you said about symbiosis. Yin and yang are symbiotic. So often we get into a fight about it. It's like, no, it's yin, and you young people, you're just like out of line. You should just back the hell off, blah, blah, blah. Or you're doing too much action. You should just be and not do. Look, this is the great thing about yin and yang. We can be symbiotic and work together, or we can just pick up a rock and beat each other over the head.
Yeah.
they're both expressions of the same thing.
Exactly.
Indeed.
And I think the other thing that might be interesting about that is this idea that when we look at yin and yang as being opposites, it's very easy to fall into that sort of masculine feminine thing where the du-mai is masculine and the ren-mai is feminine. And you certainly wouldn't be wrong to say that. But then...
Yeah, but you're not totally right either.
You're not totally right either. And now you're bringing gender into this. And the truth is that everybody has them all. And so like a lot of times I'll talk about the ren-mai as because it's typically translated as the conception vessel, right? We think of it as a woman's vessel. It governs the menstrual cycle. It does all of these things. And it must be, women having babies that contain this, new life force and nourish this life force. So it makes it seem like it's more for women. But the truth is, the archetypal nature of the ren-mai is about the ability to conceive of something, anything, not just a baby, gestate it, labor over it, give birth to it, and then nourish it until it can stand on its own. So yes.
100%. That makes so much sense to me.
Right. It's a baby, but it could be a book. It could be a piece of art.
It could be a book. You've got the conceptual level, but you've also got the plain physical level. Like, look, we're living here in three-dimensional physical reality. So it also means that for women who are making babies. And it means that for ideas and probably all kinds of other things.
Yeah. So that's why, we prefer to look at them in that archetypal nature instead of just the physiology of it, because it gives you an expansive view. And I think you can't possibly look at the ren-mai without looking at its relationship to the du-mai. It's impossible.
Of course. Because how do you understand anything that's yin? Well, by seeing it in relationship to the yang. Again, lovely image here from Luke. You've got a river with banks, boundaries, and water inside. You don't get a river without boundaries. And boundaries without a river is just a valley. So is it this or that? Well, yeah, it is.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay. We've gone from the undifferentiated to differentiation.
Right. So those are big pools or seas of resources available to us.
For sure.
But those resources aren't very useful unless we can transport them to where we need them when we need them. And so that's how you have the transporters coming in next. So the first set of transporters are the way vessels, the yang way and the yin way. Those vessels have in their pathway a direct connection to the du and the ren. And so their job is to take the resources of the du and the ren, of primal yang and primal yin, and distribute them over time from birth to death. That's the function, right? So what does that mean archetypally? That means that the nature of these vessels is to create continuity of self during transition, during change. So the archetypes that come up with that are, how do you manage change, right? And so one of the archetypes for like the yang way, which is, do you change your behavior as you age because of dwindling resources or because the resources have to be used in different ways? We could say that, if you want to talk about Jung, that one of the archetypes that fits with the yang way is called the puer aeternus, which is, it's basically Peter Pan. I don't want to grow up. I'm a Toys R Us kid, right? So this is
the boy that does not become a man.
Yes, or
which is a big problem.
A female child that won't become a woman, right? So like a classic example of that would be, a 50-year-old guy who comes in with shoulder pain that he's developed through a workout. And the reason he's developed shoulder pain is because he's doing the same workout at 50 that he was doing at 25. And, nobody's saying to him, you shouldn't work out. It's just that you have to work out differently, right? And that is not just dwindling yang. That is 25-year-olds don't have careers. They don't have families. They don't have other things in their lives that keep their lives very busy. They can work out for 2 hours every day if they want. 50-year-olds, generally speaking, have more responsibility, and so they can't really do that. So when they work out, they have to work out differently.
Oh my God. Yep.
Or they're sabotaging themselves. So this idea of, I don't want to grow up, right? I don't want my life to reflect aging. And if you look at that from a yin way point of view, what you're dealing with are the emotions associated with that, or the emotions sort of associated with how your self-image changes, not your action, but how you feel about yourself as you get older. You know, gravity always wins. There's no way around it. Some people can fight the battle for longer than others because they have good genes or they take care of themselves. But gravity always wins. And so at some point, you have to build a relationship with that where there's some acceptance around the alterations of time. And so if we want to look at that archetypally, one of the things you might consider is the archetype of the prostitute. This is not about standing on a corner and lifting your skirt and saying, hey, buddy, want to have a good time. This is the idea that in the act of prostitution, you have to come to some sense of your value. What are you worth, right? And how do you feel about that sense of self-worth? Or maybe another way of looking at that might be, what are you willing to sell your soul for?
How about this? What do you have for sale?
That's right.
Because look, we all got something for sale.
That's right.
The world thrives on exchange. You look at nature, nature thrives on exchange. So do we all have something for sale? Do we all have something to contribute? Do we all have something that we lean on as our like currency for exchange? Yes, of course we do. I wouldn't call that pathogenic either.
No, you have to know your worth and you have to figure that out. So when people get in pathology associated with the yin way, they get stuck or frozen in time with this sort of daydreamy expectation of maybe their worth being measured by certain things happening in their lives, but they don't do anything to make those things happen, right?
And what about this? And this is classic, okay? The artist who is like, I'm in it for my art. I'm in it for the soul of the work. And if I become a financial success, it means I have sold out, right? And it's a big barrier for some people.
Yeah, that's a yin way pattern.
When actually you could reap a harvest on your efforts, but you stay away from that because, if I make it, and now I'm driving a car that's not broken down. What does that mean about?
Yeah, and basically...
So that's a yin way problem.
Yeah, it's a yin way problem because basically what happens there is that means that you cannot negotiate the transition from creation to success, and that your worth is aligned with your internal expression, but you cannot see that the income coming in is a reflection of how much people appreciate what you do.
And the more people appreciate what you do, actually, the more income you're probably going to have.
So that is a yin way pathology of sorts. It is an imbalance in it that has a lot to do with our capacity to find contentment in the experience of our life as it changes and grows.
Well, look, our life goes through seasons. There's a lot that we lose along the way.
Yes.
Here's the other thing. There's a lot that we gain along the way if we're willing to lose what is necessary to shed.
That's right. That's exactly right. So that's a distribution of resources.
Okay.
Right?
This is great. Yeah, I get it.
That's what we're talking about is distribution of resources.
Okay. Yeah.
You want to take on the chow vessels, Luke?
Well, I want to make one comment on this because it's really related to our field, and that's just the ubiquitous nature of that statement, Michael, of the artist. And, if you look at our profession, we suffer from this yin wei pathology, right? Like our sense of worth, our sense of putting it out there, of making money, of having an exchange, of valuing. I mean, yes, we have a major American medical license, but amongst the licensees that are out there, ours is kind of, the one on the fringe, right? It's the one that's kind of the farthest to one side. And I hate to mention this, but it's still true. When I left school some 20 years ago, nearly, I think it was like after 5 years, only 10% of us were practicing. And that's
I don't think it was quite
that low.
No, I don't think it was quite that low.
Yeah.
But yes, for sure, there is a significant number of people who are not practicing. This is an interesting question. All right. Here's another question I've got about that. This may be a little detour, but I have energy around this. I'd like to see people be successful in what's right for them. And you know what? Maybe acupuncture is actually not right for them. So that is a possibility. Here's the other thing. I like to look at data points. How many lawyers after 5 years aren't doing law? How many people have you met that are ex-lawyers? How many accountants have washed out after 5 years? I don't know the answers to these. I know we focus on our own industry because, we're interested in it. And look, we want people to thrive and we worry when they don't because we're caring people. But I wonder, what's the attrition rate of other professions?
Sure.
And yes, that piece about, can I grow into and through the limitations that I've got through my distribution system? I think it's a very, very powerful thing. It's not necessarily that we don't know enough or that we haven't learned enough marketing. It's a kind of developmental process. I would go so far as to say a burning away of ideas that we've had about ourselves or the world that actually don't work.
I would agree.
I would see that exactly, yeah. And back to our archetypal conversation relating right to this, right? We're seeing that there's a kind of conflict, an interplay between yin and yang, between ren and du, between yin wei and yang wei, yin chao and yang chao. There's a way in which these two polarities, they're not communicating well. One's not listening to the other. And then we have a predominance of yin or a predominance of yang. But in our case, and in the cases of anyone who's having trouble kind of putting their inspiration into the world, right? How do I take me and then put it into the world? That's a challenging thing unless there's a pathway that lines me up. Like in Western medicine, why do they have success? There's pathways to jobs, right? It's really clear. They have a lot of yang that allows all that yin to move. But you put a Western, an allopathic doctor in private practice, compared to us, we have a way higher success rate than private practice allopathic physicians. Currently, I would argue that. I think that's generally true. If I look at my town, even in Portland, you'll see way more private practicing Chinese medicine people than allopathic doctors.
Because there are no private practice allopathic doctors. The industry has shifted.
Yeah.
That's right. So it poses a certain challenge for us to be entrepreneurial. What does that mean? It means more yang wei, more yang chao, right? So we kind of predominate as yin, right? We're about feeling, we're about connecting, we're about nuance, we're about the art, we're about the science, the inspiration. But there's a challenge. How do we take that and then put some containing around it, right? And that's that.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, it's like Yvonne's metaphor of the prostitute, the self-worth, and then Peter Pan. Like, will I ever grow up? I mean, I got to admit, one of the most, I can't say the most anymore, but one of the most painful times in my life was going from school to practice. It was terrifying to take this incredible, inspiring time I had and then like put a price tag on it. It was so scary, getting out there, doing my elevator speeches, going to the Chamber of Commerce meetings, Business Networking International.
What's my worth?
Yes.
It was so painful. It really was. And I'm so glad I got through it and navigated it. And it was the key to bringing all of this wonderful information that we hold to market.
So what got you through that? What did you, I mean, we could talk about the channels here or the vessels or anything else. What was it, Luke, that you developed in yourself, that you learned, that you gained a capacity for that allowed you to make that transition?
Well, I have to echo back what you said, Michael. You talked about burning away, right? And there was that process of burning away my naivete, my innocence, my self-righteousness, that I have this degree, this terminal degree at the time in a major form of medicine. And I mean, the righteousness, I was trained as a primary healthcare provider in California. So I thought that was very cool. You know, I could wear a white lab coat, et cetera. And when I got to market, no one gave, a shit about me.
That's right.
And I had to realize I am no better than a plumber, than a school teacher, than a janitor, than an insurance salesperson. I was part of the American commercial system. And it was so confronting to that Peter Pan inside of me.
You thought you could get a bypass on that.
Yeah, I thought because I was a spiritual, nice guy that the world would come to my feet. And it did not.
Did not. Oops. That strategy didn't work too good.
No. And, you know, I had a mentor who helped. I had a few mentors, you know, it was a gift of, some of you might know Malvin Finkelstein. He's like one of the first providers in America of that cohort. He was a mentor of mine. I went to high school with his daughter. And so he mentored me. My father mentored me around business, very successful entrepreneur.
What did your dad do?
He's in the fashion industry. He has a company called Will Leather Goods. He makes kind of fashion belts and wallets, handbags, that kind of thing. He has for like 40 years. So he was mentoring me and helping me kind of get out of my shell. And it basically was a 1 to 2 year process of realizing that I had something that was valuable and I just had to learn how to share it. And that was a painful process of burning away. Like in, if you've read Robert Bly's book, I'm forgetting the title, his first and most famous book about becoming a man, he talks about the ash boy and the cinder girl. So it's the story of Cinderella, going from a girl to a woman, going from the little boy to a man, right? Or going from kind of the innermost yin to a more developed yin, a more expressive yang, right? That's really what we're talking about.
And a more integrated yin and yang.
Yes. Yeah. It integrates. Yeah, exactly. So that's yin wei, yin wei and yang wei. And then the chows kind of create this groundation into what's unfolding right now and meeting that challenge both internally and externally. Yvonne.
Having a thriving, profitable practice is one of the most healing things you can do as a healthcare practitioner. Because a robust business is the ultimate expression of vital qi. And that's the heart of our medicine. I'm Julie Bairdontlock, and I help practitioners grow nourishing, profitable, authentic businesses that embody the generative cycle of Chinese medicine. This isn't about all yang all the time. It's about expanding your own internal capacity, growing collaborative relationships with your patients for ethical patient retention, and marketing as an extension of this medicine, not a necessary evil. You already know that everything is connected in your patients' lives and bodies. The same is true for your business. When we align your systems, your schedule, your pricing, and your offerings with you, we create flow, which means more spaciousness, more impact, and more joy. When you are in the flow, fully resourced in terms of qi, time, and money, your business becomes a source of healing, not just for your patients, but for you. Let's grow something rooted, radiant, and real. Visit lifeflowconsulting.com to learn more.
Tell me more about how the chow bring it into the now. Ooh, now we're rhyming it.
We should do a rhyme rap.
Easy to remember. It's a good mnemonic.
Yes, a good mnemonic.
But how do the chow, but seriously, in all seriousness, how do the chow bring it into the now?
So that's really about their pathway, right? Their pathway moves from the ankles, where your feet stand on the ground in the immediate moment, up to the eyes, which is about perspective. How do you see the world around you, right? So we have
attitude. It's about attitude.
It's about attitude. And
so if someone isn't swaggering in they should, you could treat the chows to put a little oomph in their step.
Yeah. I mean, physiologically, we treat gait problems all the time with the chows. How people
there you go.
Align themselves and move in the world, but also how they direct their vision towards the horizon or turning their vision inward for illumination, right? Who are you in this moment? How do you take a stand? And then how do you move from that aligned place into the world around you when you're going to face judgment and expectation and conflict and all kinds of other things? And so really, we talk about the way vessels as moving these resources from the Chong, the Du, and the Ren, from birth to death. The resources, the circulation of resources in the Chow vessels is from the feet to the eyes. And so they are more affected by changes in light and dark rather than, am I getting older, right? It's about the idea that you have to alter your locomotion from day to night, from summer to winter, right? Changes in light and dark affect the Chow's capacity to be present in the moment. So
there's something cyclical about these?
Yes, but cyclical in a much shorter way than the way vessels. The cycle in the way vessels is the 7 and 8 year cycles of Jing. But in the Chow vessels, it's cycles of light and dark. So it's day and night and seasons, right? And that's because they govern the opening and the closing of the eyes. Dark, light, right? And so
they have a different tempo,
much different tempo, and a tempo that is much more directly related to what is happening in this moment rather than what I'm going to plan to do 3 years from now, right?
So people that have attention deficit issues have a Chow issue.
Yes, very often. People who have PTSD have a Chow issue. People who have sleep disorders often have Chow issues. You can have somebody who'll sit down in front of you and say, oh my God, I'm so tired and I have insomnia and I just can't sleep. I get to the end of the day and I can barely keep my eyes open, but the minute my head hits the pillow, my eyes won't close, right?
Yeah, I've got those folks too.
My brain is active. I can't shut it down. My eyes won't close no matter how tired I am. That's a Chow vessel thing.
That's a Chow issue.
Right?
Okay.
These are brain vessels. So they have a tremendous impact on the peripheral nervous system. Huge impact. So archetypally, we look at them, the Yang Chow, eyes out, like the sentinel, the guard standing at the top of the castle looking at the horizon to see if the hordes are coming, right? And if we look at the Yin Chow, we're looking at like maybe a recluse or a monk, someone who can go in and sit still and be still for the purposes of insight or self-illumination. And in some ways, you could say that archetypally, they're very much in alignment with this idea of extroversion and introversion.
I'm thinking of that, is it a Greek image or a Roman image, Janus, the head with two faces, one faces back, one faces front, one faces, future, and one faces past. It's that sense of being able to look out and to be able to look in, that capacity to do both. Because, look, we live in this, I was going to say bifurcated world. No, we live in this, world of polarities. And so, of course, the capacity to look out would be connected to a capacity to look in.
Yes, and you want balance in those, even if you might have a tendency more than one or the other. Like some people are just naturally more extroverted and some people are naturally more introverted. But what you really want...
But we need both, and we need to be able to pull up the one that we need when we need it.
That's right. And we need to not be outliers.
Beyond introverted or extroverted.
Right. We need to get closer to the midline.
That's right. So talk to me. This is great. I'm sorry. I'm just jumping in. I hate to interrupt, but I'm interrupting you.
No, we love it.
I get it. There's a time you need to look out and be vigilant. There's a time you need to look in and be self-reflective. What is it that's doing the looking?
Well, that is the $1 million question, isn't it? Really, what you're talking about here is some consciousness that when I'm dealing with the 8 extras, I prefer to call the observer, right? It's the thing that we are that has the capacity to step back from being in it, see what is happening, and then make choices that are aligned with curriculum. So you could call that the psyche. You could call that God embodied. You could call it the soul. You could call it the I am.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Now we're a little further afield than I wanted to go, but I get it.
Yeah, but really, when you're looking at the Chow vessels, really what is happening here is in the moment, a person is experiencing something that helps them to recognize that something needs to change. So if it's Yang Chow related, like let's say there's some big world disaster happening across the world, right? Like somewhere in another country far away. And there's a natural disaster. Maybe it's an earthquake. Maybe it's a volcanic eruption. There's a disaster. People are dying. They need food. There's all kinds of things. Somebody who is leaning towards the Yang Chow will look at that and say, oh my God, I need to do something about this. And so they strap a backpack on their back, quickly packed, get the first flight out, and they go to that site and they dig ditches and they pull people out from under buildings and they feed people and they bring in water. And in the act of doing that, they are changed. A person who is yin chow oriented will look at that disaster and say, oh my God, I need to do something about that. And they pull out their meditation cushion and they sit. And in the act of sitting, they look at the disaster in themselves and they rectify it. And by doing that, they are changed. So I think as human beings, we need the capacity to do both of those things and to decide when one is better for us than the other.
This is interesting. Both of these are looking to help the world in some way. And the way that you help the world is by doing what is in alignment with who you are and how you can be with the world. Okay.
Yeah. Or we would say in alignment with your curriculum, right? Why are you here? Right? Like for some of us, it's to pursue something in a certain way, and we move towards that. And for others, it's our curriculum is about finding balance.
And what better way to find balance than to observe all kinds of imbalance, because now you got something to work with.
That's right. And if it's happening out there, it's happening in here.
All right. Wow. Well, we could riff on this for another 3 hours, but then we'd have to, bring in pizza or something.
We would.
Okay. So we've got our Chong, our Ren and Du. We got the Yin and Yang Wei and Chow.
What's left?
All right. Well, we got the Dai.
Yeah.
That's right.
We got the Dai, which is a weirdo channel.
Well, it's 2 channels, really. There's a prenatal daimai and a postnatal daimai.
Okay. Now you're getting fancy.
Yeah.
Okay. Tell me more about that.
I'm going to do the prenatal daimai, and then I'm going to let go of that, and I'm going to give the postnatal daimai to Luke because he's an expert in postnatal daimai expression. So the prenatal daimai is actually a true belt around the middle. It's a true girdle. The pathway of that vessel goes from Du 4 in the back around the body to Ren 8 in the front. So its job as the only horizontal vessel is to create an opportunity for integration and mediation of all the other channels, right?
Just hold them together. It has them all communicating with each other.
Communication, right? So it does hold them together. It's a little like...
It's like the great diplomat.
It is a diplomat. It's exactly what it is. It is a mediator, right? It's a little like, you see these guys doing really heavy lifting, weightlifting. They put a lumbar belt on first. They cinch it up tight, right? They brace that area and then they lift, right? So in some ways, we can look at that prenatal daimai as being a support system for the first ancestry, for the Chong, the Du, and the Ren. So it's important in the creation of boundaries. It's important in terms of mediation. So that's the sort of Shaoyang nature that it has, a little back and forth, a little in and out, little integration capacity. And it has the capacity to help us hold things together in the face of challenge.
Girdle your loins.
Girdle your loins. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I talk about Harlequin romances where they talk about girding your loins, and people are going, okay, what are your loins? And I always say, okay, they're the area covered by bike shorts, right? Everything under the bike shorts. That's your loins. You got to gird them sometimes, right? And it's a powerful tool for that because sometimes that area needs to be braced and protected in order to maintain the communication with the other systems. That postnatal daimai that Luke is going to talk about is a different thing. That's not a belt, it's a bucket, right? If you connect the dots on liver 13, gallbladder 26, gallbladder 27, and 28, you connect them from one side to the next. What you have is a bucket, not a belt.
Okay.
And so now we have some place to put things.
The bucket, huh?
The bucket.
The bucket.
The bucket, postnatal daimai. Where do we put all the experiences that we haven't had the space, the time, the space held for us properly, the developmental sequencing kind of guarded in a certain way? Where do we put all of those moments? How have we all been taught to feel, and in most cases, not feel these primary emotions, right? So we're talking about our early childhood conditioning and how that plays out over time. And again, as I talked about the brilliance of Chinese medicine, just in its kind of opening salvo of anger corresponds with the liver, joy, anxiety, the heart, worry, the spleen, fear, the kidneys, etc. What if we're not taught to process these things? What happens to those emotions? Where do they go as we kind of don't have literacy around them? Well, they have to go somewhere. We know that they don't just evaporate because we want them to, right? It's kind of like a wishful thinking, right? So that bowl, that bucket is where we put things. We put them as far away from the emperor, the empress as possible, right? Get them away from the heart. The heart is the system we know that feels and processes all of the emotions. And let's put them in a place where the heart can't quite get to. And how do we finance that? Well, we have to add something to that energetic content. We add fluid, right? We add jinya, we add jing, we add blood, we add anything to dampen, to damper, to reduce the intensity of those feelings. And back to Carl Jung, right? The archetype here is the shadow. Anything that's been unprocessed, the repository for all of our pain. And so the 8 extras, this is the genius of the system, right? It's all these, the unfolding of yin and yang, the birthplace, the resonance of my spirit, how that manifests through time, how that shows up in this moment, my curriculum as that unfolds, right? But what happens to all of those moments that I haven't been able to get to? What happens to trauma with a capital T, with a lowercase t? We can talk about all the shades of that, right? It lives somewhere, right? And the daimai, yeah.
I'm thinking of basements and garages.
Perfect.
Yes.
That's right.
Where things collect and then they collect some more and then you got no idea what's there except I don't want to go in there anymore because it's just a mess.
That's right.
Let's leave it there in the, let me get another storage bin, storage unit.
I'll get a storage unit. That'll do it.
That's right.
Yeah. That's the perfect physical expression of the daimai struggle right there, right? But here you have no access now to the lower jiao. You have no access to your vitality, to Mingmen, to...
So the Mingmen, so we put our junk in the Mingmen? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying you put it in a way that obstructs the Mingmen because the back end of the daimai is due 4, right?
So the dantian gets filled up with clutter.
With, painful, uncomfortable, unbearable clutter.
It's amazing we're all doing as well as we are then.
I know, right? Because it's a magnificent system.
Wow, I feel like you've just set the table here for
We have. Now we can start talking.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a lot.
it's a lot.
Yeah.
But it's not a class. It's a lifetime pursuit, right? It's a way of perceiving yourself and the world around you, and a way of engaging the world around you that allows that experience to be not only human, but purposeful, to have meaning, to help you to feel like you got something out of the experience of being here that was worth it.
I'm stuck on the dynamite right now. I want to respond to you, but in the moment, I'm stuck on the die.
A lot of people are.
I think we need to backtrack. We need to backtrack for just a moment, because at some point we're going to need to land this plane. Although I'm enjoying the flight, I can tell you the scenery is great. Help me for a moment. I get this sense of things getting cluttered down there. Look, you got women with fibroids, you got endometriosis. How about all the guys after the age of 50 with troublesome prostates? Okay, look.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's a lot of issues.
Yes.
That we have here. And I know that you guys do classes and you probably go way deep into it, but for myself and for everybody else listening at the moment who's going, oh my God, the die is just a bucket of goo. Where's a place to start with working that one through?
I mean, the challenge here is once you start to approximate the die, one of the metaphors we use is it's like a box, the box of Pandora. And if you start to open it, it's open. So I think talking about it is a good start, kind of more of a theoretical start. Like, a lot of folks use us kind of as counselors. They come and they share their deepest, darkest secrets with us. And there's just talking and sharing about it. But when we're talking about embodiment, that's different than talking, right? That's going down into the basement a little bit. And I would say metaphorically to start would just be taking one step downstairs. Just take a step towards it and then register how that feels, in the pericardium loop, because the pericardium is a mirror to the daimai, right? It's the only other horizontal vessel. And that's where when we start to feel into the die, we bring it up to the pericardium to then process it. Decide, are we going to bring this to the emperor? I'm going to let my heart feel this. This is the last step before we give that audience to our innermost being. So I think that's a place you start. You just begin an inquiry personally. But ultimately, here's the great gift of the die. Within it holds the pieces to our curriculum. The Chong, in a way, is reflecting and refracting its resonant power into the daimai. And the daimai is holding all the lessons of the soul. So to me, the gift of the lifetime is linked between the relationship of these two, the Chong and the Dai. And everything between there is the mediation of this process, the unfoldment of resources, the consideration of those resources. But ultimately, in my view, it's about beginning to face ourselves, all that we are, the good, the bad, the right, wrong, the high, the low, the light, the dark. It's facing all the yin and all the yang, one breath at a time, right? With ultimately, hopefully, a skilled facilitator like an acupuncturist who's trained in something like this, right? This is where it takes on a certain excitement.
Luke, as I listen to you, I get the sense that the die is a great adventure.
I could not agree more.
And here's the character that I see that I want to take with me on a trip into the die. Here's my archetype. Here's a person's energy who I want. I want Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Because it's a great adventure, and it's an archaeological adventure, and there's great magical powers that are in there. But they'll kill you if you're not careful. So you better bring Indiana Jones.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I would say, if you want to look at that sort of from a clinical point of view, first, gird your loins.
I love it.
Consolidate the prenatal daimai first before you start poking around in the dark.
Okay. All right. That is a way forward. Thank you. I appreciate the little backtrack there to get a handle on that. That feels workable.
Yeah, it's very workable. Yeah, it doesn't have to be a catastrophe or disaster. You don't have to have psychotic breaks or nervous breakdown. slowdowns. There's a pacing to this that sometimes it's pretty quick, but it's usually quick in people who are dedicated to the pursuit, who want the adventure, right? And for people who are still afraid, then you do this more slowly. You do it a little piece at a time, and you do it in a way that is not Indiana Jones.
And you want to bring someone besides Indiana Jones. Yeah, I like Indiana Jones. I think I'm asking for trouble. Here. Yeah.
I like it too. I'm going to use it if you don't mind.
Wonderful. Wow. Well, this has been lively for one. A lot of fun. Lots of I feel like I've got a sense where I can go inquire into these a little bit more. This has been very, very helpful. I hope the listeners will find it useful as well. Anything else that you guys would like to share before we wind it down for the day?
I think I'd just say, I think for all of us who chose this path, maybe not all of us, but I'd say the majority of us who chose this path, which I'd say is an uncommon path. And I think for most of us, there has been a kind of deeper nudge towards it some way. There was a way in which we were listening to the cues of life that got us to Chinese medicine, right? And if there's a deeper desire to understand its kind of energetic roots, the 8 extraordinary vessels offer such a kind of basis for that. And if you're interested, study them. We welcome you to come study with us. There's many great teachers in the world who teach them. And our work is a little different, though. Our view, which was what we started with, is about embodiment. You really want to learn them, you have to experience them. You have to. I'd say, yeah, probably need to jump in with both feet and dip your toes into them. If that is intriguing and interesting, dive in. We're ready.
I appreciate the conversation today. It has been a taste of that. Wonderful. I appreciate the guided tour through the landscape. Yvonne, what about you? Any closing thoughts?
No, I mean, I think, I love having these kinds of conversations because this is what matters to me about the medicine. So I sort of look at what's been happening in the world and how so many of my patients are struggling right now. And I am just continually sort of searching for ways to help them embrace the experience, right? Because we spend so much time suffering and in pain because of resistance, because we're afraid, because we're hesitant, because we're doubtful, because we're worried. And I'm just always looking for that way to help a person embrace the experience that they're having in such a way that they can learn what they need to learn to move through, right? And so, we just had a very interesting conversation. I love your insights. You have a really good archetypal imagery going there, and I'm sure you'll be able to use it in your exploration. But I want to have other people have that experience too, because I really feel like a lot of people feel tired right now and they feel depleted, but they're not actually depleted. They're disconnected.
That is worth putting on a bumper sticker. That's worth putting on a billboard somewhere. We're not depleted. We're disconnected.
Yeah, because not only do we have these incredible internal resources in the 8 extras, but we have all these external resources that we've isolated ourselves from.
There are some who would say there has never been a better time to be alive as a human being.
I agree.
We've got, a friend of mine likes to point out, he's got a temperature-controlled waterfall in his house. He's got a box of winter with food in it.
Yeah. Yeah, so his idea of it being a better time to be alive is different than mine. My idea of it being the best time to be alive is there's so much opportunity to become as human as you can possibly be right now because of the challenges, because of the adversity.
Okay, so you're talking about challenge as catalyst.
Yeah.
Not something to run from.
Not something to run from.
Maybe even something to embrace. Okay.
Yeah, so no running to your room with the indoor waterfalls and temperature control and, the virtual reality goggles where you can go into.
Oh, I'm not talking about virtual reality goggles. I'm just saying it's nice to have a warm shower in the morning.
It is very nice to have a warm shower, right? And so you can have gratitude for that.
Absolutely. Yes.
But it's very hard to have gratitude for that if you're afraid all the time.
Or if you don't recognize what you got.
If you don't recognize what you've got, right?
If you don't recognize your resources. If you're not
That's right.
paying attention to your chows and ways.
Exactly.
That's good. I like that.
We have a convert. I can feel it.
Well, look, it's great to practice this medicine because the longer you practice, the more questions you get. And the more questions you have, the more interesting it becomes.
Yes. Agreed.
So, and now I've got some new resources to play with.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Then we did our job.
Yes, you did. All right. Well, thank you again for a delightful time. If people are interested in knowing more about what you guys are up to, I'll have information on the show notes page. They can just pop over to the website and check that out.
Thank you so much for having us, Michael. It's been really fun to hang with you.
Yeah, it's been great. Thanks.
I've enjoyed it a lot. Thanks, you guys. East Asian medicine speaks to psychology and the emotions, but in my experience, it's in broad brushstroke ways. The liver connected to anger, lungs to sadness, the dynamics of the generative and controlling cycles. We can parse out some ideas of how emotions are included in our medicine. But I still think that our Western culture has mapped that terrain in more extensive ways. But then I've not gone deep into the Taoist internal alchemy, so perhaps it's well charted there. Listening to the Fat Monk podcast certainly does suggest that, so I am working on it. Yvonne and Luke's mapping of the psycho-emotive dynamics to the extraordinary vessels, that seems like something worth investigating in the clinic and seeing how that might show up. As I said earlier in the show, acupuncture is weird, and part of the weirdness is that the work invites us to bring our experience, curiosity, and perception to the endeavor, to see for ourselves how things are connected, and to continually explore just how this stuff works. Well, here we are at the end of this episode. If you've listened up to this point, you're either a rabid fan of Qiological or the forward button on your podcast player stopped working. If you are indeed a fan of the podcast, you can help us to bring new episodes to our community of practitioners by supporting us with a membership or a one-time contribution. Details, of course, are on the website. That's it for today, friends. Join us again next Tuesday for another thoughtful episode of Qiological.